Now, the University of the West Indies, under Sir Hilary Beckles, and the symposium on the Brexit and how it would affect the Caribbean, I think it was kind of prejudicial because Britain has lived a long life as an independent nation, and to submerge its identity in a group, it was inevitable that it won't work. And so you look at the Caribbean. I'm not sure why you didn't talk about that. The Caribbean, after colonialism ended, some leaders got together and they said, well, they will have Caricom, in which all the nations will operate under one government. And my understanding is that some of the leaders were influenced by some other white countries and they scuttled the whole game. So if the Caribbean, which hadn't an independent sort of a framework, or if they weren't recognized per se individually and can't unite, as it were, and from the start it fall apart, you got to give Britain some kind of credit because they joined this EU since in the 50s or 60s, whatever, and it's only recently they decided to get out of it. And so to look at Britain and saying, look at that, and not to look at the Caribbean's failure to unite, it's kind of troubling. And so, as I said, Britain has been the Anglo-Saxons from way back when. They developed, during the Industrial Revolution and the Reformation, all this kind of stuff. They had some great kings, and they conquered and they fight and they take over territories, and they had the whole colonies all over the world. As the British boast, that the sun never sets on the British Empire, meaning that it just keeps going, and every hour, every minute, it's shining on one of their colonies. They had them in every time zone. And so to unite with this move, I guess, as the Bible puts it, that the leaders of the world are under, they're under some kind of a, they drank some kind of a wine and they're kind of intoxicated. So they're going for anything that, these folks that are in the secret societies and all these people say, they're just going for it without even, well, they can't think differently because it's deep. I mean, to make sure the education is of such that they don't get certain things. And so with the Caribbean, I think it was Barbados and Jamaica that started to make objections as where the headquarters is going to be. Trinidad wanted it to be at Chaguaramas, and maybe they wanted it at Bridgetown, and then maybe they wanted Kingston. I'm not sure the real thing. I wasn't born. I read about it, and I was trying to see if I could have got the Caribbean to unite again in the 80s and the 90s, but I was visiting the American Embassy and they thought perhaps I was doing something dangerous, so that before I even started, they were on my case, and I wouldn't have been able to get anywhere. I might have been shot because it's something that I don't think anybody wants. Now, of course, in the Caribbean, when colonialism ended, Guyana was doing well, bauxite and rice and sugar and all that. Jamaica and other places with tourism and so on, and Barbados with tourism, etc. Those nations seem to have felt that perhaps merging wouldn't necessarily be in their best interest because some of the money that they earn would have to go to maybe support a smaller nation, perhaps St. Vincent or Grenada or Antigua or someone in these other nations. And perhaps this was one of the reasons. But when when it was in the 70s, when oil price hit and the prices started to rise, and Trinidad started having some significant increase in revenue. I know Barbados came over and got a loan, and the whole Caribbean got loans. And I guess that would be a great time to unite because this oil bonanza, they expect that perhaps Trinidad would have forego what had been happening to end the Caricom movement. Now that they have this oil revenue, they will just bring the Caribbean together and let the Caribbean be an oil producing region and share the money with everybody else and so on. So when Hillary Beckles and others are going to be criticizing Britain for the exodus from Brexit, from EU, and forgetting what happened with Caricom, I think it's an unfortunate one. And secondly, they failed to give Britain credit for having survived so long in that system. I mean, some guy in Brussels were saying where the money's going to be spent. And even in the Caribbean, they had this currency, the Eastern Caribbean currency. And we were lamenting that some nations that aren't bringing in foreign exchange, are stalwarts in spending the dollars. So Barbados and others who were a part of that monetary system were bringing in definitely foreign exchange, and they were having surplus and so forth. But other nations were spending it, and they were complaining. I'm not sure if the dollar still is existence or whatever. I've been in the Caribbean for almost 30 years or whatever. But this is how I see it, and I think that shame on the Caribbean. You couldn't get your thing together. You're upset with Britain, and perhaps with Brexit, maybe Britain is going to be able to spend a little more time with the Commonwealth and see how they could, do better, as it were, for the people in creating jobs and the whole game. Because the Beckles talks about in the symposium about the comparative advantage in which the Caribbean. I mean, it's obvious that the Caribbean not having a culture as the advanced countries. You don't have no big welfare help. You don't have no retirement, big pensions that people could live comfortably and so on. You don't have significant medical care and a whole bunch of other things that other nations have. Many nations, the transfer payment is almost half of the GDP. And in the Caribbean, they don't provide those kinds of things. You dig in a canal or a kind of a, say, 2 feet wide, cut in the earth. They don't even require that you put things to hold up the side because it might fall and kill somebody. So these, when they're going to fix something, they'll create a new pathway so that people could keep going. In the Caribbean, you have to wait or go around somewhere else, as opposed to helping you to pass. So I mean, when they're doing all that, they wouldn't now allow some nation that has a kind of minuscule and impoverished and kind of violating human rights kind of economy that the comparative advantage is going to be in their favor. They were not allowed because they're going to outsell them, and then they're going to lose out and then can't provide all these benefits that they're providing for the citizens. And so, you could have a revolution in hand. So they intentionally will go down to these Caribbean countries and talk to somebody and get them some dollars, and they're going to kill whatever they were doing that will compete. Maybe they had an interest in planting corn and so on, and they can get them a couple of dollars, and that corn thing will either get disease, or they'll say that something is wrong and we're not doing this no more, and so on. So the first world, that's how the first world will do it. So unless the Caribbean is going to come to the way, and I mean, with due respects though, I mean, Europe, although you have the North Sea and whatever, they seem to be contiguous. You could drive from one port down the road through many of the countries. I think France and Germany are close. Austria, is just at the border. But every island in the Caribbean and the mainland Guyana, so much sea around that you have to put something on the boat, take it over there, take it off. It's different. So there you go, Doctor. So Hilary Beckles, what do you think?